Right. Restore 60. We're going to be doing a lot of back stuff today. So lower back, mid back, and upper back, shoulders. We'll need 2 myofascial balls or tennis balls work. I think lacrosse balls are too hard, so just be really mindful if you are using lacrosse balls. Racket balls work too. A towel or a blanket rolled up to a depth that feels like it could fill the back of your neck. So rolling that up when you're ready, and that's where we're going to begin. You can place it across your mat, and we're going to put that in the crook of our neck. So the back of your head, if it feels like it's not touching, you can unroll the towel or blanket a little bit. Otherwise, you can, if it feels helpful, you can just leave your head there. All right, so you can play around with maybe wiggling it a little bit side to side. You can also play around with grabbing it from the sides and kind of angling the ends, pointing in the direction of the crown of the head so that maybe it sort of tucks your chin and takes your neck into a little bit of flexion. If you were looking at it from the top, it looks like maybe an upside down massage chair loop. And then let's start with our arms out, maybe even hug the shoulder blades towards one another, towards the spine and the back. Palms face up, constructive rest. So you can have your feet really wide, drop your knees in. For most of us, they probably don't touch. So if that doesn't feel helpful or productive, walk your feet a little bit together so that they can, or you could slide like a block or something between them so that they're touching if you like that sensation. But when we take the knees towards one another, it's going to help release and to open up around the SI joint, which can often get kind of compressed and cramped. So this is the opposite sort of shape. The front pack, especially like the front portion of your armpits, upper arm, that often can be really tight. So just having this gentle opening, with the arms out, palms up. And let's hang out here for about 15 breaths. So starting to draw into an awareness that you're in this shape in your body, breathing. And just letting that be enough. Start to draw your awareness to the inhales and be curious about what fills up, what physically expands when you inhale. So sometimes when we're not thinking about it, maybe it's just the chest or just the throat or just the belly. But maybe playing around with the idea of once that fills, whatever that is, noticing and seeing if you have room to fill something else. So for example, my chest is the thing that tends to fill unless I bring my mindfulness, and then I can fill up as much as I can there, and then I can start to fill up the belly, and then I can let all of that go with my exhales. So maybe not forcing the inhale as you start, just fill up like you normally would. See if there's space anywhere else to take another sip or two of air. Big exhale to let everything go. A couple more times, just being curious about that. And then one more round, just moving with a cadence that feels helpful. And then when you're ready, you're going to separate your knees. Take your feet wide if they aren't already. We're just going to slow motion windshield wiper these legs side to side. And just being curious or interested in the fact that when we move our thigh bones, those upper leg bones, at some point they can't go anymore unless we manipulate our hips. So just noticing that point. And then when we're moving our hips, because it's fused to the spine around the SI joint, we're moving our spine as well. So just being curious when one thing starts to affect the other and affect another. If one particular side or spot feels interesting or helpful, you can pause and linger for a few breaths. Otherwise, just keep flowing indiscriminately with your breath. Great job. When you're ready, making sure you hit both sides evenly, take your time, don't rush yourself. We'll pause it with our knees up, feet flat. And we're going to find those two balls that we had. All right, so if you did that crook in your towel where you kind of pulled it forward, maybe take it back to a T, but you can always take it back if that felt more helpful. We'll play around with that in a second. But we're going to use both balls at the same time for a big series here. So we're not going to take our feet together, but we are going to keep our feet about hip width distance. So if they're super wide, take them about where you would draw your sit bones straight forward. Envision maybe the center of your glute and then forward, just a sort of ballpark. You're going to rock your knees maybe about 20 degrees to the left. Put the ball in your right hand and just on the inside of your outer right hip bone. So maybe not the dead center of your glute, but just off to the side. And then right knee goes back up. And then about 20 degrees to the right so that you can place the ball. If you took it to the outer hip bone, drop a few inches in and then knees up. And now we're going to take our knees out, drop them into butterfly. So my feet are not together and I just kind of rock to the pinky edge of my foot. Where I have the balls, they sort of wedged into that border of the outer hip bone and kind of stop me. So if you're like, ooh, it feels weird, or it feels like maybe I'm just off of where I should be, feel free to manipulate the balls. They should be in a sort of upper outer squishy pocket of like the upper fibers of the glute max and maybe the lower fibers of the glute med, glute min. You can even wiggle around a little bit, try not to like push down though. But by dropping those legs out, hopefully the ball's sort of wedged in there into a place that feels effective. We move the towel so that we can take our arms out to a cactus, and so our triceps, a little bit of the biceps are maybe on the towel, or if it feels okay or helpful, you can sort of crisscross one wrist over the other, more above your head. If neither of those feel good or helpful, take those arms back to a T, palms up. But I'd like to concentrate on trying to soften the tissue, soften the fibers, right at the dead center where the ball is, because it's probably resisting and fighting. And then right around the edges of it, right? There's a center kind of spot of that circle where the ball is, and then the circumference of where the ball is also touching. So both of those specific areas, just think about relaxing even 2% more with each and every exhale. But be curious about sensation, where you're feeling it and sort of what it feels like. Maybe you're feeling more of an overwhelming stretch in the inside of the thighs. So when I place a blocker prop or these balls here, it gives me a better stretch in between my legs than when I just drop my knees out, because what happens is my knees drop out, they can't go out anymore, so my hips lift, my lower back lifts, and then I kind of just dump into my lower back and it takes some of the tension out of my inner thighs. So that doesn't mean that's exactly what happens to you, but just being curious, where are you feeling or what's drawing your attention the most obvious or specifically? Try not to resist, and I'll stop talking and we'll take 5 more deep breaths. And then maybe those last 2 breaths, play around with that idea of just allowing your breath to fill you up. Notice if there's just a little bit more space somewhere else, fill it there for another sip or 2 of breath, and then exhale everything out. And play around with that one more time on your own. And then if your arms are out or above your head, feel free to wiggle your fingers if you'd like to help your legs up. Slow motion, one at a time, or just slow motion, both legs are going to lift up. Maybe just pause with your knees up and the soles of the feet down for a moment. And then without rocking too far to either side so that you're not pushing hard on the ball, we're slowly going to remove one ball and then the other. And then you can leave in stillness or you can windshield wiper a little bit, see how that's feeling, what that created sensation-wise. Great, and then we're going to use both balls again. We're going to walk our feet a little bit closer to your sit bones, a little bit closer maybe together. And we're going to be placing them just on the outside and just a little bit lower. So a little lateral and a little inferior to the SI joint. The little dimples at our lower back that we've been kind of talking about, and hopefully that first one sort of helps release that area as well. So if you're not sure where that is, if you visualize looking up to the sky and visualize someone's back, so from the tops of their shoulder blades running parallel, the balls running parallel on the side of the spine. And then as you get to your hips, there's this new sort of shield-like shaped bone, your sacrum. And so when those things meet, the spine and the ilium and the sacrum, there's these little dimples. So lower back, little dimples, then shown out just an inch and then down an inch. So pushing through your heels, lifting up, maybe even try to find a little bit of a dimple, go out and down, and then you're gonna lower down. So for me, this is really tight. So my hips are actually just elevated. My glutes are kind of not out, not really touching many places on the mat. So maybe, hopefully over time, I can breathe and soften, and these tissues will relax, and maybe I can make some contact, but that's not necessarily the purpose. We're trying to hydrate these areas. We're trying to compress these areas. So just like before, if you feel like you're not in a helpful area or you're just close to where maybe it might feel a little bit better, feel free to move the balls. We shouldn't be near any major nerves, so we shouldn't get any like zinging or sharp pain, but if you are, please, again, move the ball or balls. It should just take like a centimeter to 1 inch to figure out how to get off of that kind of uncomfortability. That's not going to be helpful. And just as a friendly reminder, the idea of no pain, no gain is not how this works. So it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel curious. But I like to sort of practice this, and if it feels intense is a word I use often with myself or describing it to people. Sometimes intense just means that we're not used to working these tissues. So if 3 big complete exhales don't relieve some of that intensity, then I know that that area is sort of going to be like me poking the bear. So I'm just going to move a little bit around that area. I'm going to move up a little bit, out a little bit, down a little bit. You decide, just depending on the place you're working with. But know that you shouldn't just grit through it. If 3 big exhales can't relieve that intensity by even a little bit, then just move on to a new spot. I haven't mentioned our upper body, arms and hands wherever it feels helpful. I'll stop talking. Let's take 6 more deep breaths. All right, one more time. Nice deep breath in. Nice deep breath out. All right, so we're going to take our time, try not to move just yet, but we're going to press through our heels to lift our hips. We're going to find the balls. Right now, we're below the hips on the glutes. So we want to go up about 4 to 5 inches. If you visualize the sway of our lower back, and then it hits those SI joints, those dimples, then we went down a little bit and out a little bit. So we want to be just above the dimples on the side of the spine. So when you feel ready, push those heels lift. Maybe even take the balls to your body and roll up so that you're in the sway of the lower back, and then lower on down. If when you allow your pelvic bowl to kind of draw forward, and then your sit bones and tailbone kind of drop towards the mat, if that feels too intense, you can lift your hips and put a little prop under them. You could remove the towel and put them underneath your hips. Also, if you only have one ball and you've been hanging out with us and trying to do everything, at this point, you don't want to do this with only one ball, but you could use a really tight towel roll. We're going to hit about 5 more spots on the spine, and we want to be on both sides of the spine, not on it, and we want to be mindful to not be pressing really hard on one of the transverse processes, which are those side portions that kind of stick out left and right of the spinal column. So you can roll up your towel really tight, or if you have those balls there, just make sure it doesn't feel like it's jamming on a bone. If it does, just take it out a little bit more lateral. Again, elevating the hips and putting something underneath them if this feels too intense. From the navel up, try to relax nice and heavy. Place your arms where it feels helpful. We're going to take about 10 breaths here. Expand with your inhale. Soften something with your exhale. Take 3 more deep breaths. And one more time, deep breath in, deep breath out. All right, I want us to come out nice and slow and specific. Think about your lower back lifting a little bit, then push the hips like you're pulling up through your navel. Lift the hips, find the ball. Pull them straight up to your back where they just were, and then roll up about 2 to 3 inches. Slowly lower down, make sure that you're on the sides of your spine, and then slowly lower down again. So that lower back lifts a little bit, the tailbone kind of drops, the pelvic bowl arches maybe forward. If you want, you can play around with your legs. I just sort of toe heeled my feet out 1 step and then drop my knees in a constructive rest. You could also play around with toe heeling out, but keeping your heels down. We don't necessarily want to roll in these areas too much. It's more about this compression, but finding a spot that feels helpful. We're pretty close to the kidneys right now, so if it feels way uncomfortable or just something is sticking out is not right, please move slightly. But we're sort of in the sway of the lower back and a little bit more towards that upper portion, closer towards the ribs. And where we have them, when we breathe, we should be really affecting this area. So be curious about that. Try to breathe in, fill up. Notice the sensation at the top of your inhale. Notice the sensation at the bottom of your exhale as it starts to deflate. Maybe the ball goes deeper. Maybe it felt more deep or pressing in as you filled up. Let's take 10 more breaths. I want you to be curious about sensation here. Notice if this feels quite tense or full of sensation, the next spot we're going to move to, you might want to just visualize going up like 1-2 vertebrae at the most. So maybe like a 1/2 inch or 1 inch. Otherwise, you can go a little bit further up. So this is going to be up to you. But when you're ready, again, kind of press through your heels. Visualize lifting from the front body and lifting off of where the balls are, and then lifting the rest of the torso. Take the balls, lift them up to your back about where they just were, and then decide, go up just like a half an inch, or maybe about 2 inches, so that we're up on that rib cage and a little bit lower than sort of bra strap height. So play around with this spot. Anytime you're in a spot that feels tense, or maybe there's sort of like a sensation of pulling from another area, right, where the ball is, feels okay, or something you can breathe through, maybe you should, but maybe from like the side or above or below, you feel like a pretty intense pulling, then maybe you want to stay in that general area, right? Because maybe some other place pretty close to where you are is actually where it might be helpful to go next. But again, we want to stay off the spine and then off those transverse processes. So just lateral the spine about 1 inch or 2. If you're tensing your glutes or your lower back or your belly, 3 exhales is a good indicator. Remember to move after that if it doesn't feel like it's giving you any relief. Let's take about 10 more breaths. Also, if at any point you want to remove the towel or add the towel behind your neck, if you're over it, get rid of it. If it feels supportive, feel free to keep it. We're getting closer and closer to the ribs, but anytime we're really working in this sort of axial body, we should be affecting sensation with our breath. But even still, the closer we get to the lungs, and specifically the rib cage, should be quite obvious, to at least a bit more obvious. So again, maybe just being curious again about the top of the inhale, the bottom of the exhale, sensations in between those two. When does it feel like it starts to increase sensation? Take 3 more deep breaths. Play around with filling your belly with breath first. Then when you can't feel any more, then expand the rib cage. So breathe in normal, take the breath to the belly, expand more through the ribs, and then everything out. Great, one more time like that. Great, when you're ready. Again, visualize lifting from the front body, then lifting the back body off the balls. Push those heels, lift yourself. Find the balls, take them up to your body about where they were. And this time we're going to roll up far enough to where we're going to get to the lower portion of the shoulder blade, so the inner border of the tip of the shoulder blades. So off the spine, inside the shoulder blades. And then we're going to lower those hips. Ooh, that took my breath away. So pelvic bone went forward, tailbone went down. So we're right about that strap, a bra strap probably. We get 3 deep exhales. If it doesn't feel helpful, remember you could use a towel roll, a tight towel roll. You could move the balls up or down a little bit. We don't want to go in. Out might work, but you might be bumping right into that inner border of the shoulder blade, so just be mindful. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be helpful. It might actually feel good, so you decide. Be curious around those breaths. Try to loosen your grip with your exhales. Six more deep breaths. Great. One more time. Nice full inhale. Nice full exhale. All right, be mindful. Where the balls are, it might be a little bit awkward based on your shoulder mobility. So if you want, you can remove the towel and go up and around. Or if it's easier, again, think about lifting through the front body, pushing through the heels, and then lift yourself. We're going to remove the balls all together, lower down. Feel free to take your feet wide and windshield wiper. But the next location is going to be up to you. It's going to be our final location along the spine. So like I said, either maybe one at a time up and over on both sides of the spine. We're going to be sort of mid to upper portion of the shoulder blades. Or if it feels like you could lift and get it into an okay spot, you're going to lift up really high into a bridge and just find the spot you were, roll up a little bit higher, and then slowly come down again. So it just depends on really the height and then your shoulder mobility to get the balls into a spot that might be helpful. If this feels too intense, remember you can back off, you could use your towel. Also a good idea, if you do it up higher, you're going to be on the traps, which are really meaty. If you're kind of right in the center of the shoulder blades, you might be more superficially on those ribs, so it might be a little bit more take your breath away kind of sensation. Plus, we're working with the rib cage and the thoracic spine itself, which tends to have the least amount of extension. So what we're doing is creating sort of a forced extension by placing the balls in this area anyway. So lots of reasons why this may or may not feel intense or uncomfortable. About 3 big deep exhales as your good indicator to see if this is maybe a sustainable spot. If not, as always, give yourself permission to change it up. I've moved the neck roll. I just feel like at this point, my chin is lifting up, and when I have the towel roll, it's usually drawing my chin into my chest a little bit, so it's a little bit more helpful to roll the back of my hand through my chin. Making that mobility to go into a back bend at your thoracic spine can be difficult, so when you do it, it might take your cervical spine, your neck into extension as well, so that's why maybe rocking more to the back of the head or up near the back crown may be more helpful. Doesn't mean it has to be. Been here for a little bit. Again, this is probably somewhat of an intense area, so just noticing how you feel now versus when you first placed the balls. You really don't want sharp or stinging. It shouldn't really be near nerves, but who knows when we're working with this stuff, it can create all kinds of sensation. So moving just a little bit up or down, if that's the case, otherwise staying with the breath in stillness. We're going to take 6 more inhales, 6 more exhales. One more time. Big full inhale. Big full exhale. All right, just depending on where the balls are and your shoulder mobility, take your time. Try not to press more onto the balls in order to lift up. I know that sounds weird, but a lot of times we push down to lift up. Find a way to come off them and remove both of them. Stillness or move around. Maybe you want to draw your knees into your chest and rock a little bit. Close your eyes and be curious about sensation. We're going to be hitting another spot on our back. It's one of the big spinal stabilizers, and it pulls our bodies into lateral flexion, which is that side-to-side bending. It's called our QL or quadratus lumborum. It's dense and thick, and usually can be more asymmetrically tight, meaning one side tends to be tighter than the other. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to set up and show you where I kind of like the balls. We'll be using both balls on one side, and then we'll take a moment to gather, and then we'll do it on the other side. So stay where you are, keep inviting movement. If you'd like to look up, feel free to look up. We're going to be starting on the right side. And if you think about where the ribs end, and then there becomes the lower back, which sways in, and then it's no longer sort of encased. So the ribs wrap around, and then you've got the free-floating lower back. So around the area where the ribs then turn into no ribs, right? That space. The QL starts and attaches to the back of the spine, the side of the spine, and on some people the front of the spine as well. And it goes at a diagonal and hooks down towards our outer upper hip bone. So at a diagonal. So what I'd love us to do is have both balls sort of around the area that we already had it, around that area of like where the ribs drop off to the side of the spine. And then the other ball is going to be out and down on an angle. All right, so to do that, we're going to come to a position when you're ready where both balls are in your right hand. Bend your knees, plant your feet. You're going to rock your knees to the left. Kind of manipulate one ball so that you can find where the ribs drop off. It's on the outer portion, the lateral portion of your spine. And then again, I would just like to have the balls like together because then I can just angle it out and then that's where the other one's going to go. They're pretty much going to be touching. So if you draw your knees back up to the sky and you're like, I feel like I'm on something, but I'm not really putting enough pressure. Well, there's that divot to our lower back. So if you would like, you could lift your right leg up and relax your foot and see if that sort of dropped you onto it. For me, it did. Some people like to go to figure four. And then if you go to figure four, you could even lean a little bit to the right. But allowing for the lower back, especially on the right hip, when we lift it, to sort of go into more flexion, it should draw the pelvic bowl backwards and then take some of that sway up so that we can get a little bit more pressure on the ball. Don't force it though. I don't want you jamming yourself on the balls. That's not the point. Again, we're just looking for some compression to help hydrate. Notice if it's intense, okay. Again, usually asymmetrically different. We tend to posture different. We tend to sleep on one side versus the other. So think about if you were sleeping on one side, your hip is sort of hiked up a little bit towards that rib cage, or when you cross your legs, or when you stand and then kind of jet one hip up, the one side is shortened as the other side is pulled, right? So asymmetrically, they're usually not the same, which is what asymmetrical means, right? They're not symmetrical when we do shapes. Typically, almost every shape affects one and the other differently. Breathe deeply here. We're going to take 6 more inhales and 6 more exhales. One more time when you're ready, take a nice full inhale and a complete exhale. We're going to slowly come off of this, so however you want. If your legs crossed, you might want to uncross first. Maybe you want to roll a bit back to center or to the left first. It's really up to you. But it might feel achy, so just be mindful of that. Remove both balls. It's up to you. Knees in, legs up, feet down. Extend your legs out. Keep breathing, keep inviting your sort of curiosity to this. How is the right side feeling different than the left? And then we're actually going to take a shape versus doing myofascial to help elongate that. So we just compressed it, now we're going to kind of stretch it from banana asana. So if you have the towel roll behind your head still, feel free to keep it. Or if you don't have it, it might be nice for your arms. So I'll set up the lower body first. Let's extend your legs out. Open them up hip distance. Option 1, just slide your right leg towards the left, heel to heel, and then drop those feet out, relax your glutes. They probably fired. Great.
And then bend your elbows and kind of press your triceps and elbows down so you can wiggle your upper body a little bit to the left. Relax that left glute, it probably fired. So I like to either have the towel roll behind my head or I just kind of pull it above my head so that it holds my arms. And I like draping opposite wrist or taking cactus arms. If you want to, you could have your left hand grabbing onto your right wrist. But if you could sort of visualize now, we're in a subtle, right, crescent moon, which means the left side QL, which we haven't addressed yet, should be shortened a little bit. And this right side, which we compressed and we've been manipulating, should be lengthening. So we compressed it, hydrated it, and now we're lengthening it, which then hopefully when we go back to normal, it's going to start absorbing like a sponge even more. Gaze can be left, right, or center. Try to relax both glutes. Try to relax your feet, your quads, your face. We'll take about 12 breaths here. Great, 2 more breaths. Right, one piece at a time, slowly come out. Maybe just pause in what we call corpse pose, sort of a neutral on your back position. Try to be as symmetrical as possible. Relax everything you possibly can. Try not to touch any props. Great, when you're ready, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Wiggle fingers and toes, stretch those arms over your head. One at a time, squeeze your front body, draw one way, and then the other, give yourself a hug. Maybe rock a little bit side to side, or stillness. When you're ready, find those balls in your left hand. Again, I just kind of like to palm both of them, and then one of them's going to feel like more dominant that you could direct. So mine's going to be the inner palm. So I'm going to rock my legs a little bit to the right. So I'm going to try to place the ball, one of them, on the lateral border of my spine from where my ribs kind of drop off. So kind of where you think your kidneys are, maybe just a touch lower. And then you're going to angle the other one out and down. So if you were just holding them kind of side by side, just angle the other one out and down a little bit. So even more lateral and then a little bit inferior. And then you're going to come back. Again, knees are going to be up, feet are down. If this is enough, then this is enough. Let it be enough, right? Otherwise, option of drawing that left thigh into your chest. For me, that's enough, so I'm not going to go any further. You could play around with crossing that left ankle. Oh, that kind of felt good, though. Left ankle over right thigh. Or you can play around with then, once you cross, you could lean a little bit to the left. Some people like it if you drop your knees out. I feel like unless you're using that big gray ball, the center ball, that the crisscross figure 4 is just a little bit more helpful. Finding an angle, though, that feels helpful to you, one that you can breathe in, right? Take that at 3 deep breaths, sort of marker as an indication on what you'd like to do, stay or move a little bit. I'm just going to sit up in case you need a visual look on where the balls should kind of be. So my spine is here and just off, and then one is just off, the other one's down and away even further. And they're about touching. They might separate a little bit just when you're moving, but that's okay. We're going to take about 10 more breaths here. So try not to create a shape or a sensation that you're like, oh gosh, I just have to get through this. Although it might feel like that at the very beginning, right? just depending on the intensity in which it's creating sensation, but it's not the point. So we can always just move or come out or back off or breathe deeper. Big full inhales, big complete exhales. Let's take 2 more. Great. Slow motion again. Maybe you want to just lean off the balls a little bit. Maybe you want to uncross first, but you decide. Try not to push more onto them in order to remove them. Movement or some stillness. Be curious about side to side. Be curious about side to side as far as, did one feel more intense? Did that make sense with maybe your day-to-day activity or how you posture? Gathering information as you practice. And then when you are ready, we're going to set up banana asana other side. So again, blanket behind your neck, above your head, not at all. Start hip width distance. Slide left heel towards right heel or cross ankle on top of ankle. Relax those glutes. Relax the quads, the belly. Bend your elbows to wiggle yourself over with your tricep. Again, maybe that towel is in a nice position to catch your arms. If it's too intense, maybe just cactus arms. Relax your left glute, relax your right glute. Relax your face and breathe. Take 15 inhales, 15 exhales. 3 more deep breaths. Notice if you're contracting, can you soften? Then one piece at a time, slow motion, nice and mindful. Coming back to corpse pose again. Just creating as much as you can symmetry in the body. Try not to touch any props unless it's that supportive roll behind your neck. One more deep breath in and a deep breath out. Let's go ahead and squeeze our bellies, pull one thigh into your chest, belt by the other. Maybe rock a little bit side to side. Great, and then it's up to you, about 10 breaths here. You can take happy baby, you could grab onto wherever it feels okay or helpful. You could grab those big toes, you could straighten and drop out, or just kind of straighten a little bit more. You could rock a little bit. You could do single leg in, single leg out, but just hitting that inseam a little bit, knowing that if you do have back pain, we've been physically working with the back, but there's a lot of reasons that the back can feel tight. It could be the inside of our thighs, it could be the front hip flexors. So just being mindful that there's lots to it, but hopefully by working specifically with it, we are getting a little bit of relief in these areas too. But knowing that's not the end all be all. A few more breaths if you're doing anything asymmetrical. And eventually we're gonna need one ball, our towel roll, and we're gonna be rolling to our left side. So coming over to your left side when you're ready. You're gonna place the towel roll behind your back. The idea is that hopefully it's gonna catch us here. We're gonna come up, either you can cradle your head in your hands. If this feels okay from your side, you're gonna use your right hand, grab your ball and place it on your right pec. So I think this whole upper area of sort of your chest, and then maybe even a little bit up to where the attachment is onto the arm bone. You're just gonna roll this around. Kind of gently, just be sort of curious, but working with these fibers to let them know that we would like them to elongate and stretch because they tend to be tight. So if this is too intense, doing it with the same hand, roll back onto your back, I apologize, and use your left hand to drop that right arm out to a T, right? So 2 options. Great, just a few more breaths doing this. Let's maybe even close your eyes, relax your jaw, deep inhales, deep exhales. If you found a little crunchy spot, maybe stick a little bit closer to the area, maybe just pause and press. Wherever you are, one more deep inhale, deep exhale. Great, and then putting the ball somewhere where it won't roll away. If it does, you'll find it, I'm sure. But we're gonna come back to that left side. I'm gonna just cradle my left head, my head, and leave one of those with my left bicep and arm. I'm gonna take my right arm up into a cactus, and then I'm just gonna kind of peel open. But I have that towel roll nuzzled into my back. So it's all the way from like my glutes, my lower back, my hips, all the way up to the shoulder blades. And hopefully I have it in a place where it's gonna catch me. So it's sort of supporting now my torso. It's even kind of pushing my back forward a little bit so that when I take this right arm to a cactus, I can just kind of let it hang back. And now we're hanging off these tissues that we just rolled. So rolling and then stretching in the direction of which you would like to maybe train those tissues is a really great way to play with it. So if this is too intense, you could drop your right hand to the side of your rib cage and just open that arm bone and elbow back, right? Little less intense version. Possibly even more intense is arm out to a T. Yeah, much more intense for me. Also hits that bicep. Not interested right now in that myself, but feel free to do that. Like hanging like this as an option for stretching. I don't like doing this as a general modality, but after doing a little bit of myofascial release and doing it for just a handful of breaths, I think it's really helpful. So let's do this for about just 6 more breaths. Big inhales, think about expanding those chest tissues on the right. Exhaling and softening, loosening your grip there. Think about all those tissues breathing in, expanding with your inhale. Slight recoiling with your exhale. All right, a few more. All right, one more time when you're ready. Expansion, slight contraction as you recoil. Start to wiggle those fingers. If you straighten your arm, bend that elbow. Slowly just come all the way to your left side, dropping your right hand either sort of in front of you or just draping it on your hip. And then we're going to be doing that on the other side. So it's really up to you. If you'd like to come to tabletop and do some cat-cows or maybe puppy pose or maybe even down dog, feel free. If you just want to push the towel roll back from behind you, roll onto your back, take any movements, feel free to do that. But we'll meet on our right side or on your back if you prefer that to do the opposite hand. Because remember, the first thing we're going to do is manipulating the ball on our left pec. So if it was easier with the opposite hand, maybe come to your back, left arm out, drop all the effort, or use the same hand and do it from your sideline. But one ball will eventually come to our right side. Nuzzle that blanket towards your side all the way up to your back. On those hips. Just hitting all kinds of areas. And like I said, if you find kind of a crunchy spot, maybe pause, maybe stick with it. If it's too awkward with your left hand, and get roll on your back, use your right one. Maybe head up to the upper inner arm bone, that front deltoid. There's also a lot of attachments there. All right, one more time, breathing in, breathing out. You're putting the ball somewhere where hopefully it won't move on you. We're going to support our right head this time. Or our head with our right bicep, right? And then, again, make sure this is the towel or the blanket is up towards those shoulder blades, the upper back for sure, so that when you start to peel back, it is already on you and then it's just supporting you even more. Adjusting your head and support system however you like. I think sort of a cactus arm with a loose hand, so you're not working your hand at all, maybe it just recoils into a loose fist. I think that feels really helpful, and it's not overstretching or hanging up of anything. I mean, it's definitely pulling this whole area that we just rolled. Again, if you want to try arm to a T, just adding more body weight, right? So a little bit more emphasis, might even pull all the way through that forearm and bicep, or even less left hand, kind of that side of the left rib cage and that arm bone and elbow just drop back. Either variation, try to relax. Try to find that nice opening and expansive nature on your inhale, passively recoiling and contracting on the exhales. We'll take 6 more breaths. Okay, one more time. Big breath in, big breath out. If that left arm went straight, you're going to wiggle your fingers first, bend your elbow, and then we're all going to kind of lazily, heavily roll back to our right side. Again, left hand maybe just drapes on your hip or drops in front of you, but pause, stacking joints, taking a few breaths. And we'll set up for our final resting place, our Shavasana. So, whatever you'd like to do, seated meditation, legs at the wall, supported butterfly, lots of great options. Trying not to force a shape, right? Shavasana is about letting go, beginning again. Let it be nice and comfortable so that you don't have to do anything in particular. If your mind is at all still racing, maybe give it some focus by doing a nice, slow, and steady body scan. We did a lot of myofascial work. I'm hoping you're feeling nice and relaxed. But maybe not, right? Maybe that created sort of a stirring of sensation and thoughts. So if it did, give yourself some focus, either on the breath or just thinking about a body part and then taking a breath there. And then moving on to the next. A few moments here in stillness.
Start to draw your awareness back to the mat or the space that you're in, the space that you're on, the body that you're in, to the air that you're breathing. I'm going to ask you to just stay where you are instead of coming out into a seated shape or something different. Just stay where you are. We did a lot of work on the spine. As you start to, though, maybe come out of Shavasana, maybe your breath starts to deepen as you start to become more aware of it, more aware of what's going on. Just notice how you feel. Notice what you feel. No matter how subtle or dramatic, trying to be an observer. Trying to absorb the efforts of your practice. Planting a seed of gratitude for showing up, rolling out your mat, knowing that that's enough. This practice is enough and that you are enough. Bodies are pretty amazing, resilient things. Trying to observe that from a kind, benevolent lens. Just a few more breaths. Staying where you are, maybe drawing your left hand to your heart and your right hand on top. Thank you so much for showing up and practicing with me. Deep breath in. Namaste.